Hi there, well this is a little introduction to just a provisioning server, a little jump start to get you going. What I've got here is, well, the simplest way of starting this thing off is just to use VMware Workstation. If you've got this, this is handy. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the installation of the various components onto a server. And what we need is just one little Windows 2003 server. What I've got is I've actually got an Active Directory server and just a regular server here, just for simplicity's sake. So server install. Okay, here we go. Running provisioning server, MSI, yada yada yada. This is just a simple install, and I'm going to try and show you the easiest way to do this. Just kind of a next thing. Ooh, and Tinkerbell waves a little wand, and we come back from coffee, and it's all finished. Obviously, you could also mount the ISO to your virtual machine. That would also work. I've just used a shared folder using VMware. Now here's the configuration side of things. Now this bit, actually, you can choose to use any of these things. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. But what am I going to be doing is I'm going to say that it's running on another device. And the reason for that is it's on my laptop. I don't want DHCP messing up with either my network or somebody else's network when I'm demoing this. So I'm going to run the PXE on here, yes, but not DHCP. Makes my life simpler. Probably also keeps me out of trouble when I have to when I'm on somebody else's site. There's my network cards. I've specifically chosen an IP address here which is not on my internal network, so I might mess with it. I want to be using the provisioning server TFTP service. I want to tick that. Now this basically, this little bin thing over here, that's the file that's going to boot your virtual machine, your virtual machines. Well, either physical machines or virtual machines. But this is going to boot the machines that your provisioning server is actually streaming the disk down to. Here's your boot servers. Yes. That's my next server. Now this is showing all of the services that are going to start. DHCP I'm saying is somewhere else. Pixie I'm installing locally, and TFTP. In a live environment, you would definitely be running DHCP somewhere, and then you'd add in, either run it on your Arden/provisioning server, or else you would add that 6667 scope options into your DHCP scope, which would basically tell it to go find your Pixie server in X location and use X bin file, that little TFT bin file. That's where you would specify those kind of options. And I'm going to do another little Tinkerbell waves the magic wand here. Oh, no, it's quicker than I thought it was. And now we're done. Fantastic. So it's just the first part of the install, which was so diabolically slow. That's all there is to really installing the server. But the next bit, the tricky bit, is to actually get your disk image going, and that's the fun bit. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, so we've got the server installed. Now just look at the little client. And again, I've just mapped it to my local hard drive, and just gone to a shared folder on my local hard drive. And as you can see, we've got a provisioning server for the device install. There's a 32-bit one over here, and we got the 64-bit ones and the Linux device ones as well. I'm obviously running this on a 32-bit XP workstation. I think you'll see what this does is it creates this as an instance inside, well, for provisioning server, and allows me to copy this XP device and copy its disks up to my provisioning server. So I'm just going to go next, install. I mean, this is fairly simple. We just got one server with AD and provisioning server on, and we've got another little XP Professional machine. And what I'm going to do is I'll create some more XP Professional virtual machines and just stream a disk down to it. And it comes up and says found new hardware ready to use, and what it's basically found is it's found a new virtual disk. It pops up and says, where's that? I click finish. It's probably going to tell me I'm going to have to restart, no doubt. Let's have a quick look at that before I do that. In theory, if not in practice, it should appear here somewhere. And there we go, Citrix Virtual Disk. And it's probably the first and last time you see Citrix and VMware so cozy next to each other. Let me restart this. Okay, so here's the next bit. I'm going back to my provisioning server now. As you can see, I've just rebooted that XP Professional machine. And I'm doing this particularly because I haven't got a DHCP server. So what I'm doing because of that is I'm going to this boot device manager and creating myself a little I'm creating myself a little boot disk, little ISO boot disk. I'll make it, what is 10.0.0. 10.0.0.3 255 gateway I don't care about. And what I'm going to do is just next. I'm going to give it a static IP address to my device. I'm going to make it 10.0.0. Start with 20, let's say. And I'll make us my DNS server 10.0.0.3. And I'm going to burn a little ISO. Now what this is doing is it's creating a little boot ISO disk, which is basically the same as that little bin. It basically will point to your PXE server. So instead of using DHCP and to assign your IP address to your booting device, I'm here using CD ISO image, which I'm going to mount as a CD. Boot using this, give myself an IP address, tell it where to find the PXE server, which is this server which I'm on, and then it'll actually load the boot information from the TFTP server. So let's call this test 1 for want of a better name. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that up to my workstation. So I've put it over here somewhere, I think. And copy to a shared space. Pop this straight onto my provisioning server share, and I'm just going to save it. I'm creating a little folder over here called you can see the mess on my local hard drive. paste it in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my XP workstation, edit my settings on there, and I'm going to say use ISO image, browse for that. Should in theory be under ISO, and what I'm going to do is I'll need to go connected and connected power on, and I'll restart that machine. So then I'll just quickly reset this machine. XP machine, and I'll leave that blank. Now it's going to have to reboot, and what should happen there basically is that I should have picked that up over here under Provisioning Server somewhere or other, the console. There's my machine. There's a new XP machine. It's seen, it says, oh, there's a new piece of hardware. And when this thing finally boots up again, whoops, and it's booting up using the hard drive, and I need to change that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the boot options, properties, disks, and I've got, it can either boot from the hard disk or from the virtual disk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it copy, boot first from the hard disk, and then what I'll do is I'll copy the data from the hard disk to the virtual disk. Okay, so we swap back to our provisioning server, and what we need to do here is we need to create a disk to map to that machine. So I'm creating a virtual disk, just a regular one, and I'm going to call it new XP machine, spell that, and it's got to be at least the same size as the physical hard drive that you're imaging. So I'm going to make it 4096. That should do the trick. Whoops, and don't make the same mistake that I did. I've just added another hard drive in there. You're going to need, for your virtual disks, you'll obviously need lots of space. If you're going to create a couple of virtual machines, you'll need as much space as you will require for those machines. So I've added another hard drive on there, and let's go create the new virtual disk. Okay, great, that's created. It does take a bit of time, I must warn you. And now back onto my XP machine, properties, disks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this disk to that virtual machine. Well, to that machine, that host. It could be a physical host as well, I suppose, using within the Arden's world. In this case it is a virtual machine. And there we go. It's got a virtual disk which is now associated to it. So what we can do now is hopefully reboot this puppy and see how that goes. So let's bring this virtual machine back up again. And as we rebooted it, you can see that it's now active inside our console, and it's picked up the hard disk on the provisioning server. So I log into it now. I'm still booting off the local hard drive on this virtual machine. So this is going to the VMDK file in this case. It would be the local hard drive in a normal environment. And so here, what should occur now, should be connecting up my hard drives. Now this is an oddity, I'm not quite sure why it's happening, but I have found a simple solution to it. So what I'm going to suggest, I'm not quite sure why Citrix is doing this. Citrix, help me out here, tell me why this happens. What I'm going to quickly do is, in spite of, I do have licenses, but it just seems to want to not get the license. So what I'm going to quickly do, of course this wouldn't work in a live environment, but it works well enough if you're just testing it. I'm going to quickly restart the provisioning server service on the device. And strangely enough, when I do that, the licensing seems to write itself, or else it just starts working. So now I've got here's my C drive, which is my local hard drive. I've got another drive over here, which is actually the provisioning server drive. So you can see it's just a pure raw disk. And the one that says Citrix boot is actually, that's my little ISO that I created earlier, that I actually booted the device off. What I'm going to show you now is the actual imaging bit. So I'm going to go to Image Builder, Provisioning Server Image Builder, and I will copy my C to my E and build. And this will remind me that I do need to format it first. I'm going to do a quick format, just change the headers on there. And our format's done. And build. So it's going to copy everything from the C drive to the E drive now, basically, which means it completely replicates your entire C, Windows, registry, the whole works. Now obviously it does it at a raw block level, copies everything over from C to, in this case, E, or whatever you've mapped your provisioning server drive as. Okay, so now that's all complete. Okay, that, close that, and it should all, as you can see, everything in its entirety is now copied over to the E drive. Swapping back to the provisioning server again, let's have a little my little machine. I'm going to change the properties on that. Let's just test that disk. And I'm going to change it from hard disk to virtual disk first. And what should happen, if theory, if not in practice, when I reboot that, it should boot off the virtual disk now. So let me reset that machine. There it's finding itself. And booting off the virtual hard disk on the provisioning server. So I log into that this machine over here, and as you can see, all seems to have come up again, and we've got not a lot inside the application log, and that's because it's basically come up as almost a new machine. And the C drive is now your that would be your disk again. I'm going to change the mode of that disk. Currently the disk mode is set to private, so basically so I can read and write to it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make it a standard. Now what that's going to let me do is to assign this disk not only to one machine but to multiple machines, and the bits that are different on the various machines. So in this case, if I'm using this in Zen desktop environment or VDI environment, I can have multiple machines all booting off this one virtual disk, and any personality or changes that are made on that individual machine will be written into write cache on the F drive of this particular server. There we go. And I'm going to have to remove the locks off the disks before I can do that. Let me just go assign, manage disk locks, remove all. And then I can change the disk mode. What I'll do now is I'll create another XP machine and boot it also using the same disk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another ISO. Now obviously this is a bit of a pain. If you would have to really have a DHCP server in a live environment, because you couldn't do this for every single machine. But what I'm going to do is create another little ISO for my next little virtual machine. So I'm going to go back there again, handy little increase button, knock it up one. I'm going to save this ISO and boot my next XP instance off this ISO, so it'll have a different IP address from my other XP machine, which is also booting off an ISO at the moment. So I'll burn that. Test 2, and this will be my XP2 machine. This is all very basic, and I'm not putting any refinements in here whatsoever. And I'm going to use the same mechanism to copy this over and boot the other one off my new XP machine off that as well. So I'll go File, New XP Machine. There we go, Virtual Machine. Wizard, GUI Wizard, XP Professional. Don't really care what I call it. And the disk size now, I'm going to give it 0.1. And the only reason I'm giving it any disk at all is because otherwise VMware Workstation complains and whinges that it won't work. So there we go. So I'm obviously giving it a 100 meg disk. It clearly wouldn't work if it wasn't for Provisioning Server. So I'll grab onto that ISO image. Which I've stored on my local hard drive. I've just copied that from the Provisioning Server over to here because I can boot off it. And this is going to boot using an IP address of 10.0.0.21. Now this is going to add itself into the little database when I start it up. Now it's asking me for device name. This is the name again inside Provisioning Server. So I'm going to put in XP2. Second device. And the disk I wanted to use, I've only got one disk available to me, so I'm going to use the shared disk. This new XP machine disk over here. So boot of it. And then my selection is, do I want to boot off the local hard drive first, or do I want to boot off the virtual disk? Clearly the local hard drive is only 100 meg in size, that's not going to work, so I'm going to choose the virtual disk, V, and boot. Well, restart in that case. Quickly pop back here. You should actually be able to see it's actually come up with, you can see it booting up in the background, but you should be able to see that it's actually here. If I go refresh, there's XP2, and when it comes live, and I'm going to have to go onto it and log into it and again fiddle with that little licensing thing. Oh, strange oddity. There we go, so it's up. Okay, two little refinements you'll need to add under the security options of your default domain controller security settings. If we go into here, disable machine account password changes, go and set this to enabled. Otherwise the machines try and reset their passwords in the background and they lose track of what's going on with each other, because what we're hoping is going to happen is that we're going to have provisioning server managing that. So if we look at our disk, you may need to remove the locks on yours. If we have the properties of our disk, we're going to let Active Directory handle our machine account password management. Now if we don't do this, what happens is the machines try and resync passwords, and because it's being stored on our provisioning server, they lose track of each other and the whole thing falls over. So the easiest way to do this is just to set that ticked and set that policy ticked. Just to recap, that policy was under your default domain controller security settings, and it's disable machine account password changes. So there are two new machines in our domain, effectively, or not in our domain. This one called new XP machine, and I'm going to add target device to domain and OASTC, and in it goes. And the next one, add target device to domain, and again add them to the domain. So now both of those new machines that we've created are both now in the domain, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start them up, and they should both come up absolutely fine. So here are our two XP machines. Here's the one, and you can see here's our little provisioning server widget showing us that new XP machine is running using a virtual disk. It's active and all stuff that's chatting over the network to that disk. And the other machine likewise, it's also got its little virtual disk. It's new XP machine 10.0.0.3, so it's got a different IP address, and it's talking to that's our controller server, our provisioning server. And if you go back to our provisioning server, write cache, as you can see over here, we've got both of those machines are running the differential stuff, the delta stuff, to the write cache. So anything different on those two machines from each other will be written to write cache. And any new machine that we wish to create using the same disk will create its own little entry inside write cache. Okay, and here's just one last little thing I'd like to show you. Here's another vdisk XP machine which I created earlier, and I just wanted to show you how you could, if you create yourself another one, obviously using a similar type of mechanism as we did earlier, you can go to your machines and you can change your disks as easily as this from one piece of hardware. On that specific piece of hardware, obviously you can change your disk from, say, here's I've got XP machine to, maybe I've done some make some changes to it. I could change my disks over and remove that one, and as simple as that. If I booted that device now, whether that be a thin client that's actually connecting to this virtual machine over the network or whatever it is, it would now pick up the new machine and the new XP machine, and that would run over the network. Okay, great. Well, that's all that we have that I'm going to be able to do today. I thought this was going to be a 5-minute thing. It's ended up taking almost half an hour. So, well, hopefully it's been useful, and you'll be able to use it to make yourself a great little demo.